네, 고맙습니다. 여러분 2025
Thank you so much. 2025 Kim Dae-jung Peace Conference is going to begin. The Peace Forum is going to begin again.
점심시간이 여러분께
It is still raining outside, and I hope you found the lunchtime as refreshing time. Now, we are going to jump right into the second session with the topic of China's responsible power theory and world peace. And moderator and our two speakers are already on the stage. And Ambassador Chung, the former ambassador of Northeast Asian Cooperation, MOFA Korea, is going to be our moderator. And we are in the honorable presence of Director Zhang and also Professor Lee. Please welcome our speakers and moderator with a big hand.
여러분 안녕하십니까?
Hello everyone, good afternoon.
한국이 낳은 세계적인 지도자 김대중 대통령이
A global leader born in Korea, we are here to commemorate President Kim Dae-jung and to discuss a new vision of coexistence and peace for the world and the Korean Peninsula. The theme of the second session on the second day of this event is China's responsible great power theory and world peace. I am a former diplomat and I used to work at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, seconded to the Blue House, and currently serving as today's moderator. It is my great honor to attend today's event as the moderator. Today, Korea faces a rapidly changing and highly uncertain international environment. The first reason is that the international order based on legal norms and free trade, from which Korea has greatly benefited for decades, is now rapidly collapsing.
강대국들의 힘을 앞세운 자국
Instead, a zero-sum international order driven by great power competition is taking shape. Now there are wars in the Middle East and also between Russia and Ukraine. Another reason is that the U.S. and China hegemonic rivalry, especially in military security and emerging advanced technologies, is intensifying, and Korea is one of the countries most affected by it.
한편으로 한국은 북한의 핵 위협에
Meanwhile,
한미 동맹 강화가 어느 때보다도 필요한
we need to have a stronger alliance between Korea and the U.S. But the U.S. we used to know is not the U.S. that the U.S. at the moment is not the U.S. that we used to know.
그분의 지혜와 경험을
So that's why we ask for the wisdom and the leadership of the U.S. of the past. But we miss those days, but not anymore.
아마도 앞으로 10년
Meanwhile, our neighbor China continues to grow and narrowing the gap with the U.S., and it is projected that in about 10 years, China's economy could reach a comparable level.
짝수로는 부상을
China, aware of the international community's concerns over its rapid rise, has since the early 2000s emphasized its role as a responsible great power.
해오고 있고 또 그걸 강조하고 있습니다. 특히 미국의
In particular, as the role of the U.S. becomes unstable, we expect China to take an active and responsible role in ensuring peace and stability in Northeast Asia and on the Korean Peninsula.
역시 1960년 때
President Kim, from the very early days of 1960s, has proposed the security guarantee theory by the four powers.
경찰과 같은 역할을 해오던 미국
The U.S. has been served as the police of the international community, but now its role is being changed and shaken from the root, and the role of China is gaining attention. So let me introduce how today's session will be proceeded.
중국의 역할
We are going to talk about the newly asked role of China. So that's why we invited Director Yunling Chung, Institute of Asia Pacific Studies from Chinese Academy of Social Science. And we also invited Professor Namzu Lee, teaching in the Department of Chinese Studies from Sungkonghoe University. We will give 20 minutes to each speaker, and then we will invite two speakers to share their thoughts on each other's presentation, and then we will open up the floor to ask questions from the audience. Please be mindful of the limited time. Your personal opinions and comments, of course, very valuable and important, but please share them on separate occasions. We will only take questions. 30 seconds per each question. So if a question goes over 30 seconds, apologies in advance, we have to stop here. Now, we will invite the first speaker of today's session 2, Director Yunling Chung. He is the world's renowned scholar, well known around the world, and he taught at the Shandong University and very active in the Asia Pacific region. And there are two types of national assemblies in China, and there is political discussion committee, Cycle 11 or Cycle 12, Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, CPPCC. He has been part of it. And the coexistence and shared prosperity, this cooperation mechanism is one of the research topics that Director Zhang has expertise in. He has many exchanges with stakeholders in Korea, and back in 1995, when President Kim visited China as the leader of opposition, Director Chung was there to bridge our president with stakeholders in China. And Professor Lee is a well-known expert on Chinese matters, and he has expertise on the relationships between China and Korea, and also expertise on North Korean issue. And when our president was alive, Professor Lee has many interactions and exchanges with our president. First, without further ado, let me invite Director Zhang to the podium.
Good afternoon. Let me first thank that organizers invite me to come to this conference again. And I was asked to talk about the China as a great responsible power. Just my understanding how to explain it. Let me start from China's rise. I think China's rise is a great phenomenon in our today's world for many factors, from economy to technology to military, very comprehensive as a big power, has rising very quickly. And it's also, along with this rise, its role in the region, in the world, has also strengthened. So it's natural that all the countries, especially existing powers, concern very much the China's rise. I think in facing China's quick rise, a lot of questions, but I just summarized the major three concerns. One that is, one is that what China will do, what China want, or what kind of world in the rising China context. So I think this is the basic three questions I try to answer. Let me first answer the question that what China wants to. I think China's key want is China's dream. And we can also say to make China great again. Because in the history, China used to be a great power, very influential. But in the modern time, it is fallen. And after the People's Republic of China, and all people, Chinese people, want to make China great again, but experience a very difficult time. But the new SARS started from 1978, when Deng Xiaoping decided to do reform and opening policy Reform, that is reform the traditional system learned from Soviet Union, that is planned economy. Opening, that is open to the West, because China opened to the East in the past. So these are the two decisive, I think, decisions which make China change very quickly. So that follows that China's dream, we call it China's dream, to make China great again. So there is a blueprint that is to 2050, China will become a great country, advanced, and the most advanced country in the world. So that is very clear China's dream. And I think it can be summarized that the three major objects. One is to make China number one again. Second, to unify the country. Third, that is play the leading role to reshape the world future. That's, I think China's dream is not just for itself. It tries to play a more important role in the world development. So as China become a rising power, and China want to be a new power, that is, China would be different from the old powers. As we all know, that all powers, when they rose and they expand, expansionist policy, invade the other countries, the European great powers occupied almost the world. But China will not do that. Probably the age we are living are different. But however, China want to be a new power, that one that is following a path of peace and development, being a responsible power, building a new and a better world. That is, if we try to summarize China as a new great power. And if you want to, the China well understand, if you want to continue the rise path and realize its dream, and the only choice for China to have a peaceful rise environment. So China decided, public announced that we're following the peace and development road rather than the traditional old powers. Because China itself needs a peaceful rise and strives to build a peaceful environment by the following efforts. One is forging a partnership relations with all countries, including existing and emerging powers. This showed very clearly, especially when the end of the Cold War, then China had a great pressure how to go. The China endorsed a friendship policy and called it a partnership. Make all kinds of different partnership relations with all different kind of countries. That involved, I think, make China have a better environment rather than a confrontal. At that time, and from the US, from other countries, the pressure is very, very big for China. Firstly, with the surrounding countries, also including to make a partnership relation with the United States. The second, acknowledge the participating, defending, and reforming existing system with the UN system as a center. So acknowledge the existing and participating. China committed not to overthrow it or to make a new one to replace it. The third one, China commits to be a positive contributor in the world peace, world development, and world order. This is clearly stated in the Communist Party's 20th Congress. These three contributors in peace, world development, and world order. It's a contributor rather than, to replace it. That's, I think, the one, like what China wants. That's what China wants, or how China does. And then a world under China's rise, I think China announced is to be a responsible great power. This word was firstly used in 1997 when the Asia financial crisis happened, and China committed not to devalue its currency and support the Southeast Asia countries to recover as quickly as possible. A lot of following cooperative efforts together with Southeast Asia and also with the PRK and also Japan together in East Asia. To be a responsible great power become, I think, is a general concept later and enriched. And I think it represents a general concept, I think, China as a new great power to play the role in the changing world. So responsible great power in different times, and China, as I said, gradually enriched this concept as a responsible great power. And during Zhang Zemin's time, and the focus of responsible great power is how to deal the relations with the United States. Aside from, helping Southeast Asia countries to recover as, and cooperate together with ROK and Japan and promote the East Asia cooperation and so on. But great focus is on how to deal with the United States and what kind of relationship China to make that is showed its responsibility to avoid a confrontal relationship with the existing great power, the United States. And during the Hu Jintao's time, and that China more focused on to build, called it a harmonious world. And that is to reduce the tensions and to promote the cooperation and so on and so on. So you can see a lot of announcements, actions during the Hu's time. And though many people would not believe that the world will become a harmonious one, but however, that shows China's intention. That is want to make, a less confrontal world with emerging differences and conflicts. During the Xi Jinping's time and the current, that is, I think that's changed more, that is more focusing on the role of China to play in reshaping the world in the profound changes unseen in the century. Profound changes unseen in the century become a simple summary of China's understanding of the current world. So during this kind of changing world environment, and what China can do, that calling to build a community with a shared future of mankind. That is a general, I think, a strategy for China. That is the shared future, the community for shared future. And firstly, translation is misunderstood. It seems for, but I think it's a very good translation from Chinese into English. That is community for shared future for mankind. And that shows China's intention to build a different world. Also some with actions, not just with, the slogans, with China's real input and actions, like BRI initiative, and cooperated with 150 countries, signed the agreements built together. And also making until now, China has made 4 major global initiatives. First one is Global Development Initiative, and with a lot of real actions, and also set up the UN, on the UN framework, the friendship group, including almost 100 countries together. The second, that is Global Security Initiative. The third one, Global Civilization, and encourage or promote the civilization dialogue, and rather than to, let that civilization clash and happen. And the newly one that is just announced some time ago during the BRICS leaders meeting, that is global governance. Because in facing, we have a lot of challenges, changes of this multilateral system, and built after Second World War II, China called on to strengthen the global governance cooperation. And also China, as I mentioned, not just make this call, but also put a lot of inputs. And like building China, aside from a BRI initiative, and also China built AIIB and SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, and so on. And that is, I think, shows China, that's China's commitment to be a responsible great power. And quite newly, that is Premier Li Chung just announced during the UN Assembly, and China announced, and China will no longer insist it's the developing economy in the WTO, and to not give up this status in the multilateral system in the future negotiations. And though China considered itself still a developing country. So this is, I think, the new show that is China in this multilateral system has been challenged, and China announced this to promote this on the equal and sustainable multilateral system. Of course, China itself has met a lot of challenges, is facing a lot of difficulties. The economy is under restructuring, and outside the environment has changing, and has overcome these all difficulties. But I personally think that China has no choice rather than to continue its open and reform policy, and to create a better environment, and try to avoid in any verse overall confrontation, especially a war with the United States. If you see the recent days, a lot of new interactions, and try to make these relations manageable. I think it's probably, we can't control it. It is manageable. And people used to talk that China-US strategic competition. I hesitate to use it. I said it's a US strategy and strategic competition with China. China has to be respond. And but China's main intention, unlike the United States, that is protective, and I call this sometimes generally is a soft approach rather than the hard approach, and to tit for tat. Sometimes show that tit for tat and show, but in real actions actually is eager to dialogue and to make concessions, and in order to make these two powers, great powers, relationship manageable. So the world, all of us actually are now living in a different world if we compare it to what we have built after Second World War. If we call the US, it was a responsible great power after Second World War II to build this global system, multilateral system, a lot of layers, systems, but now we call Trump is irresponsible. Why is it called irresponsible? Because it's just done is by itself. Whatever it's decide, the U.S., make U.S. first and consider U.S. and press the other countries and change anything on will if it likes. So I think this is, I show it is responsible. But we have to live with this condition because U.S. is still very strong, powerful, and especially the institutions, as I mentioned, we built after Second World War, supported, led by the United States. But we have to find a way. I think the real challenge for all of us is how to meet the comprehensive challenges. It's our joint responsibility for the global community rather than for China itself, and how to manage U.S.-China, so-called and China-U.S. strategic competition. And China announced again, we don't want to be a world leader, but we try to play a contributive leading role in many areas. We want to promote the world to a better one rather than worse one. So it's our joint responsibility to make the world better rather than worse. And because the strategists, political scientists talk about whether we're back to the 19th century or something. Personally, I don't believe that because the world is different from 19th century. So one of the key factors is to manage China-U.S. relations, essential for China, but also for responsibility of the world. That is to encourage these two powers to manage their relationship, not damage our better future. Thank you. I'll stop here. Professor Ambassador Lee. Thank you.
우리 장 원장님이 국제 회의를 많이 참석하셔서 제가 20분 내에 끝내달라고.
The Professor Zhang just kept his time on 20 minutes limit. Thank you. He talked about responsibility of China in international community. It was easy to understand. If I can summarize, he mentioned the three dreams. By 2050, in the paper, it was specifically said 2049. It was 100 years from its inception as a nation. China wants to be the #1 in the world. And second, the unification should be pursued, including China, Taiwan, I guess. And the third, #3, a dream is to be a leading country in the world. In the first part of his presentation, he said that China wants to develop the world with the current system intact, including the UN. And also, he presented 4 actions that China is doing. The first is Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, Global Civilization Initiative, and lastly, Global Governance Initiative. And based on this, China is promoting and implementing policies in line with these goals. So China wants to avoid the direct confrontation with the United States
Instead, they want to use and cooperation with the United States to lead the world. And in the the presentation, he well captured the future of China and the world. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Professor Lee.
발표 제목은 중국 책임 대국론이 직면한 도전과 한국의
My presentation's title is Responsible Power Theory and Korea's Role. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to make a presentation in front of you. And Kim Dae-jung Peace Center, thank you so much for organizing this forum. And the Academy of Kim Dae-jung Studies, Mr. Park, thank you so much for your efforts.
오늘 행사 의미가 있으니
China's responsible power theory and Korea's role will be presented in the context of anecdotes and stories related to our President Kim Dae-jung.
저한테 주어진 주제가 중국의 책임 대국론인데
I was asked to talk about the concept of China's responsible power, but Kim Dae-jung, our president, also mentioned a couple of times on different occasions regarding the China being the responsible power.
천하를 장악한 자는 특권이 있었지만
He said
이제는
before
천하를 장악한 자는 평화와 복지와
in the past, those who dominated the world enjoyed privilege, but now they must take responsibility.
천하 태평이 개념이
Universal peace. The concept of it has evolved from just the privilege, but now it is being talked about from the perspective of responsibility to achieve universal peace. With the rising influence of China on the global economy, now they have to take more responsibilities in ensuring peace, welfare, and the happiness of the people. I believe China has already become aware of the responsibilities that come with the privilege of being one of the superpowers in Korea. Just like
한마디만 보태면
other speakers talked about a lot, the concept of a great power started from the 1980s or 1990s. As we experienced, there was the Asian financial crisis back then. Everyone suffered. In order to get out of that black tunnel, the Korean won also being depreciated greatly. We were suffering as well. And for China, they had to secure export competitiveness. And if the Chinese yuan is too much depreciated, that will impact neighboring countries. And China declared that they will not go for artificial depreciation of their currency yuan. That was the responsibility that they showed. And just like our director said before, the concept of responsible power has been there over the years. So I will not add more details because it has already been well explained by previous speaker. But awareness and also execution are two different things. Regarding China, China is emphasizing the concept of the responsible power, but the way they are there are some people who express skepticism by watching how China is doing. So this is something we need to talk about. So during the process, there are many challenges for China to truly become the responsible superpower. The first change is how to wade through the U.S.-China rivalry, which is causing a number of significant and serious issues. So back then, our President Kim Dae-jung said that if the U.S. and China cooperate, the world will benefit, but if they clash, the world will suffer. Those are the words that were said by our President Kim Dae-jung back in 2009. But it's not happening at the moment. They are not fully cooperating with one another. It is very important to ensure responsible control and management so that the two superpowers will not clash, so that the world will not suffer. So momentum for cooperation between the two superpowers has to be created so that there will be no clash and it will be good for everyone, and that is the significant responsibility shouldered on the US and China. But they have to work together. If only one wants cooperation, that will not happen. So two countries need to be on the same page. So since China is emphasizing the concept of the responsible power, it is important for China to explain to the rest of the world how they want to achieve and become the responsible power. And the second challenge is the relations with neighboring states. How is China going to foster relations with neighboring states as the responsible power? For example, diplomacy with neighboring states, for example, Korea and Japan, has not always been rosy and optimistic. There are many factors contributing to that. But I think that is because the imbalance of the military power among the countries that is leading to worsening relations with neighboring states. That I'm not saying it is good or bad, but if the balance is out of balance, especially in terms of military strength, there can always be differences on instances. So we need to make efforts to ensure how we are going to tackle such imbalance, whether it be military imbalance or other imbalance. Of course, China, as the responsible power, has to proactively share their thoughts on the future roadmap. And lastly, other than the rise of power asymmetry, I want to also talk to you about the concerns of over the great power narrative. China's goal was to build a socialist, modernized great power by 2050. How I understood it was that China wants to now focus on qualitative growth, not only focusing on quantitative growth. We can use the word like a culture, the power, a great power in science, technology, education, and culture, and so on. But in the framework of great powers and weak states, the logic of survival of the fittest may prevail. And also, China's overreach has heightened concerns in the international community. Therefore, China must manage its externalities and rebuild trust with neighboring states. For example, China has proposed multiple national visions such as Healthy China, Beautiful China, Peaceful China, and Good Life China. So these visions can be specified even further through more efforts. China evolving as responsible power is very important not only for China but also for us. I also want to spend more time on the stability in the Korean Peninsula and North Asia, which has served as the common goal for the interest of Korea. And this stability in the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia has also meaning for China to become a responsible power as they wish. And against that, the backdrop, if you read through a book about President Kim Dae-jung, there is a very important line in his autobiography. Our four major, our four-country alliance,
다대국 정상 외교에
it has to be one alliance and the cooperation among three countries.
대통령으로서 처음 중국을 그전에도 이제
As the president,
중국을 방문하셨을 때
President Kim Dae-jung visited China as the president, and he said Korea is sandwiched between four power countries, great powers. We may be squashed among those great powers, but if we become a peacemaker or a pacemaker or matchmaker, we can survive through such great powers. This is the beauty of diplomacy, and we can partner up with China. So China is very important to us. It will be an important country for us in the coming years as well. That was the message that was emphasized by President Kim Dae-jung because he wanted us to act as a bridge among the four major powers in Northeast Asia so that we can contribute to universal peace in Northeast Asia and beyond.
설명이 됐습니다. 근데 이제 모두 뭐 잘 아시고 계시지만
As you may well know, over the years,
큰 어려움들이 이제
Korea-China relations have gone through a tough road and patchy road.
지금 그 미중 경쟁 관계로 인해서
Because of the US-China rivalry, the US is taking deterrence policy stance, and they are asking us to join their efforts in U.S. containment strategy on China.
문제긴 하지만
And also internally, anti-China and anti-North Korea have been utilized by some political parties to strengthen their political base. That delusional thinking was manifested in the form of coup last year by then administration led by President Yoon.
이 두 요인이
Because of these uncertainties and because of the U.S. containment strategy on China will play as a threat on the Korean peninsula, deterring peace. It will not be beneficial for anyone.
새 정부의 출범, 이 정부
With the
출범이
inauguration of the new administration led by President Lee, we need to wait and see how things will change. Up until now, Korea-U.S. cooperation and also beneficial relations between Korea and China have been emphasized by our president. Our president was on a plane and had a press conference with journalists on board. He emphasized the message of pragmatic diplomacy from the very early days of his presidency.
발언을 한 것이 아닌가 이렇게 생각합니다. 한미 동맹이
He said Korea-U.S. alliance will serve as the foundation
외교에서 친중 협중이 어디
for our alliance, but he said when it comes to diplomacy, it's not only with one country, but it's with many countries that can be beneficial to your national interest. That's his thinking on pragmatic diplomacy. And cooperation in economy, culture, of course, our cooperation with the U.S. is important, but we cannot sever our relations with China. So we need to be very cautious. He also is aware of the importance of our relations with China. Of course, it cannot be stopped just as in statements. It has to be turned into policies. We have to go through many hurdles, but President successfully indicated the future direction that everyone should move forward. So what is important is to expand the scope of cooperation with China. I forgot to move our slides. Anyways, it is important to strengthen the basis for stronger cooperation between Korea and China. We had the diplomatic ties over the past 3 decades, and there were many negative negative stories coming out of the diplomatic relations between Korea and China. However, I want to tell you that
기여에 대한 인식을 조금 더 제고하기 위한 노력을
for our economy to grow mutually, we have to preserve the cooperation between the two countries through to people exchange and through other means.
사실 민간 부분의 관계도 우리가 이제 많이 인용이 되지만
Korea-China cooperation cannot be talked about without the importance of the private sector cooperation, especially people-to-people exchange. As emphasized by many research institutions and the academy.
최근에는 좀 어느 정도 바닥을 치고 조금
And
노력을 하게 되면서 긍정적인 요인도 생겨나.
now we are rebounding and have started to have positive influence on each other.
중국으로 많이 가고
And many of Koreans are now visiting China. And after their visit to China, they have changed and more positive perception and image of China after their travel. So if we facilitate people-to-people exchange, we will be able to solidify the framework for further cooperation with China. And if we look ahead in the next 6 months, it is very important to have high-level discussions and talks as many times as possible. And over the past couple of years,
한 중간에 정상회담은 별도의
Korea-China summit or high-level meetings have only talked about a carefully selected list of agenda, and also a brief sideline talks whenever there was a global summit or global forums and so on. But it's not enough for Korea and China to strengthen our mutual relations. We need to have more discussion opportunities. And fortunately, in November, we are going to have an APEC, and we can have Korea-China summit meeting on the occasion of APEC officially, so that such official high-level meeting will serve and pave the way for more collaboration and cooperation between the two countries.
평화 문제가 되겠습니다.
The peace on the Korean Peninsula is a very important topic for us.
한미 정상회담에서
Remember Korea-US summit? Our president said that he will serve as a pacemaker for the peacemaker who is Mr. Trump.
대립이 상당히 고조된 상태에서
Now the tensions between the US and China and the US North Korea have gone up, but based on the mutual trust and based on the consensus, we can
남북 대화가
improve the
어렵다라는
situation.
인정한 발언이라고
And
합니다. 이런 방향에서도 어쨌든 좀 진전이
moving
이루어질
towards
수
that
있도록
direction, our president declared his commitment and willingness to improve the situation.
페이스메이커로
So
시작했다가
even in a marathon, you can start as a pacemaker, but you can sometimes win the race. So in the long run, even though our president said he will be, or Korea will be the pacemaker, but in one day, we can be the peacemaker.
발전이 돼야 되지 않을까.
In order for us to become the peacemaker, we need improved relations with China.
대통령님의 꾸었던 꿈이
And the dream envisioned by our former President Kim Dae-jung must have been us being the peacemaker in the end. Thank you so much for your kind attention. That will be the end of my presentation. Professor Lee is well known for his great lecture, and it was so interesting to listen to him. He said that you can start as a pacemaker, but you can end up winning the marathon. That was very good story with lasting impression. He talked about the meaning of China being the responsible great power. And he talked about the importance of having more high-level meetings between the two countries. So our job is to make our public feel more fond of each other. And over the past 30 years, the miracle of our economic growth has been achieved thanks to the support shown by the mainland public consumer demand. So there are so many areas where we can mutually cooperate. However, due to geographical situation or the geopolitical situation, should I say, our relation has somewhat been undervalued. And just as our Professor Lee said, he also talked about our Director Zhang's presentation and shared some comments made by our former president. And one of them was, if you are a great power, do not only focus on privilege, but you have to take responsibility that comes with the privilege. And it is important to be recognized as a responsible great power. If you claim that you are a responsible great power without the recognition, it doesn't mean anything. And also, Professor Lee said that we need to reignite our commitment for stronger cooperation between the two countries. We should make our public understand that two countries can be beneficial mutually. And our two speakers did a great job of managing their time, so we have about 20 minutes to take questions from the floor. As I said to you before, please refrain from sharing your comments. This is not a venue for you to share your thoughts or opinions. These 20 minutes are dedicated to taking questions and getting the answers from our speakers. So if you have any questions, please do not feel embarrassed or do not be shy. Let us know if you have any questions to our speakers. While you think about questions as the moderator, I will ask questions to our director Chung. Here goes the first question.
교수님 발표 내용 중에서
While he was speaking,
중국은 대국이 되지만
China is great power. However, it wants to develop the current system, including the UN system. It was included in the first part of his presentation. In the latter part, during the Xi Jinping time, China wants to have a structural, a fundamental change. Are they in the same context, or in the Xi Jinping time? Do you mean that
새로운 어떤 세계 질서
China wants to build a new order, overcoming the old new order? Rather than, I would say, replace, I may say that China wants to create a new world order, overcoming the old order. This is the question that I have for Professor Chung. And another question is for Professor Lee.
지금 한중 양국 국민들 간의 그 호감도
The Korea and China citizens would have a different sentiment toward each other. And you are the professor, so you know the students. How the university students feel about their counterparts in the two countries? Do they have a same level of friendship or different level of emotions toward each other? Professor Zhang, would you go first?
China's initiative, its actions, policies, as I mentioned, that China does not want to overthrow the existing system. But China considers UN system as the center system after Second World War II. The UN system, actually human beings have never made before on the global level. So this is the center. But there are the other systems, Some system built by the US-led Western during the Cold War time. You have a military alliance and so on. But China does not accept that. But China has no ability to overthrow it. Like when you make relations with ROK, but China does not ask ROK to quit from the alliance. Acknowledge that is the existing structure, but we built a new. So I made a theory that Korea, China as a temple, if you see the world order after the Second War as a temple, China does not overthrow it. But China tried to build some new ones because the existing one is not enough. So that is China, what has done. So I don't think the Chinese government want to overthrow it. But the challenge is the United States wants to overthrow it already, has taken actions, quit from many organizations and hesitate to take the responsibility and have changed a lot of things. That's one thing. The U.S. does not, like it, does not support it. The third, that is something new, is different, quite different from what we were living in the past, like a currency system. We have, like a trade system, like many others. And also we have the emergent, the wars, like Russia, Ukraine, actually is between, I called it as a post-Cold War, effect. And the Cold War ended so quickly, and a lot of things have not, carefully built. So that is something. We all need some new efforts to build. But what I emphasized just now, we have to do it together rather than by one country. China has no ability, and also the other countries do not support the China to build quite different ones. So we have to work together. That's why China make this grand 4 initiatives on a global base: development, peace, civilization, governance. That's the 4 key issues what we are facing, together rather than China itself. So China emphasized again that is, China does not want to be a leader, but in some areas want to play the leading role to promote this, that's a better direction, and we believe. And that's supported by many countries, like BRI, that Belt and Road, and with more than 150 countries, they signed agreements built together. So this is a thing welcomed by the other countries. Why not? That's, I think, relating to your question. I think concerning, our conference is relating to President Kim Da-jung's dream. Actually, President's dream is to have East Asia community, to make which he believed that only the community building in the region can make the Korean Peninsula safe, Northeast Asia safe. And he initiated this vision group, and I was one member. We made the proposal to leaders that's East Asia community building. So this spirit is still there, but though this movement seems unchanged somewhat compared to what he proposed at that time. But this is still the direction. If you consider China's role and on the Korean Peninsula, China initiated 60-party talks, but though we failed, but we bring all the parties together. Finally, we agreed to build a new Northeast Asia, to build a security regime, but it failed because many reasons. And also China support this CJK, China, Korea, Japan, trilateral dialogue and cooperation, though many difficulties stop but start again, and now we continue. China play, I think, is a very positive role to support. If we keep China, Korea, Japan together, and then there will be the peace. I don't think if these three countries can and share their views and share the interests together, as three leaders can have an annual meeting, more than 45 ministers and the other, meetings together every year. And this is, I think, the basic structure. That's my. So you see, China does not want to change the alliance system. If you like it, you can continue, but we should do something else rather than, rely on the old one. That's, I think, China's general. Thank you.
예,
했는데 우리 박수
He
한번 좀
made a very clear answer. Let's give him another big round of applause, please.
좋은 답변 감사합니다.
Thank you for the answer.
그 최근에 리포트도 많이 나오고
There are many reports recently and many press covered over the past couple of years. The public sentiment towards each other has been negative.
사드 때 나빠졌다가 사드 갈등
And first turned negative after the thought issue, improved a little bit, but then went toward negative sentiment towards each other over the past couple of years. I think
원인이 많죠.
there are many reasons behind negative public sentiment toward each other. Let's think from the perspective of young generation. First, young generation in Korea, they are so used to the history of democracy,
긍정적으로 평가하는 반면에
and they value the they place great importance on democratic values. But if you look at China, we kind of think that they are moving away from the democratic values.
다른 한편으로는 이제 이거는
And on the other hand, it can be true for both, but there are conflicts and confrontations in the cultural context. And young generation in China
민감하게 반응하는
also
것 같습니다.
react sensitively to culture-related issues. For example, if a cultural heritage is registered, they are arguing or fighting over who has the ownership over what. Some people even claim the ownership of the kimchi, the Korean dish.
중국에 대해서 그 부정적 인식이 증가한 것이
The reason that a heightened negative public sentiment toward
그렇게 생각합니다.
China is driven by a number of factors.
그래서 아까 슬라이드에 잠깐 지나갔는데
As
퓨 리서치
I briefly introduced, according to the Pew Research,
중국에 대한 인식이
the view of China
세븐이나 발전국가
is not so bad compared against the unfavorable views held by those living in advanced countries in the West.
있지만 대부분 이제 비서구
In most cases,
국가들에서 보면
among
중국에 대한
the
호감도나
Eastern
중국에 대한
countries,
호감도나
our
중국의 호감도보다
views towards the US and the West and towards the China are somewhat comparable to one another.
저는 이제 어느 정도 부정적 인식은 있는 것은 불가피한
We understand there is a certain level of unfavorable views of each other among the public in Korea and China. Sometimes it has been depicted through the extreme lens. We have to understand what drove our public sentiment more towards the negativity other than the positivity toward toward China. And one attributable reason could be found with the media coverage. Because the Korean media has been somewhat more active to cover negative stories of China, and this is not good and beneficial for better relations between Korea and China. We need to understand that.
국민들이 조금 더
Therefore,
관심을 갖고 그러한 어떤
I'd like to encourage our public to have more interests in our neighboring countries, including China, and we need to have a systematic mechanism to control too much negativity covered by the media press.
피셜한 언론이라고 보통 얘기하는데 어쨌든 공식적인 언론에는
The official media outlet has some control mechanisms, but there are like individual created contents and such as bloggers. They tend to cover extreme stories that have a very much negativity toward one another. So we should have some kind of control mechanism for such contents. But I'm not too pessimistic about our relations with China. You know, last year, China gave a visa exemption for many countries. And today is Thursday, right? And now young Koreans, they casually talk about, oh, should we go to China over this weekend? So the travel barrier has been lowered for a young generation. So maybe they had negative perception toward China, but when after visiting China and coming back to Korea, our young Koreans have more favorable views of China. And you know, it is true after the coronavirus pandemic, people-to-people exchanges have been decreased. Everyone has differences, but such differences do not necessarily have to result in negativity towards one another. So we should not be extreme, but rather we should have objective view and try to understand each other so that we can build more favorable relations with any neighboring countries, including China.
I think we are too much controlled by this kind of media because in every country now, extreme groups dominate. That's the public media. That's a danger, I think, for every country, because the reliable people, responsible people, they do not put too often of their views on this kind of groups. So I think it's somewhat, you just see that, but I think it's do not believe too much. That represents the main trend of the even people-to-people relations. I took an example last year that I organized the 3 countries, China, Japan, Korea, university students together. And our leaders worry too much that if you should take responsibility if the 3 countries' students fight each other. I said, don't worry about it. Once they get together, there will no fight. They will talk about the shared common interest rather than differences. That's happened. You know, they make friends, they, laugh, and the whole atmosphere is very friendly. Maybe some of them on the internet is a different face, but once they get together. So I think the problem is our policies or even our spirit. It's too much dominated by these extreme groups. If you see the US, it's also same. You know, in China, also same. And people seem, in China, everything is controlled by the government. Actually not. The media is, it's very free. And also one of my relatives and I know, every day she do what? She just make the points to support that media groups to earn money. You know, every day she can earn 200 yuan. She does know nothing. It's just paid by something. This is I think, is the world we are living. We have to be very careful. So what I mean is the relations between the countries and it should not be dominated by this so-called that's social response or kind of dislike rates too high. And also happening in China, dislike rate is very high on Korea, on Japan. Japan is just the same. But if the people sit together, it's quite different. And business communities still. And I attend a lot of business communities. They just want to have a better environment to earn money, to do business. And so that's, I think, the different world we are living. Thank you.
아유 감사합니다.
Thank you. After the two presentations, I would like to give each of them to make a comment for each other's presentation. However, I got some significant questions. That's why I asked the questions right away. If both of you have any comments for each other's presentation or speech, this is not compulsory. If you have any comment and opinion for the other party's presentation, you may do so, and then I would like to entertain questions from the floor. Maybe.
1세션에서도
In the first session, I wanted to ask this question as well. Now I have the chance. I want to ask you. You briefly talked about the role of the U.S., so my question is related to that. Simply, President Donald Trump has a defined term. After his term, the world will be different from what we see now. More stable, I hope. The U.S. may be moving towards more stable global order. So what's your thought on that after the days after the Donald Trump? So why don't we invite Director Zhang to share his opinions on that question?
I think it's for one is sure for some time in the future will continue. That is, U.S. as a super existing great power try to do anything to contain China's rise as a competitor. I think this will continue, but probably in the different ways. If you see Trump won and Biden administration did even more than Trump won. But now as Trump too, I think if Republican Party will continue, it's almost similar. Even have a change, I think this we'll see, long time. How long, I don't know, but however, China is prepared to do this. For instance, will contain China's technological development, control all kind of relief of high tech toward China. This will continue. But this forced China to spend more on its own capacity, ability. But China is advanced in manufacturing. U.S. probably continue to be advanced in this innovation, in a theory and even the patent. But China is advanced in manufacturing. They will see the electric car and the robot, all this kind of areas. So this something probably competitive. Each one cannot replace another one. That's probably the character for China, U.S. as a kind of a division of labor in the future. But however, so what I emphasize in my presentation is we have to manage this rising China carefully, not by China itself, also by the others. When I arrived here, some friends asked me to comment on this picture on the September 3rd, and Kim Jong-un, and Putin on the front in the three. I think I answer that it's not, I think, a special meaning that means the three countries will organize a bloc. No. But it says some meaning if you guys do not come, and if you follow U.S. strategy content China, we have something to do. That probably, as my personal understanding. But I think the mainstream of policy thinking, top leaders still try to manage this less confrontal or non-frontal relationship with the United States. So let's help China to do it. Thank you.
그 마지막 아주 중요한 말씀도 다 해주셨습니다. 사실 한국 언론에서
He pointed out very significant implications. And Korean media said that Russia, China, and North Korea wants to form a bloc. giving threats to South Korean security. That was the general understanding, I believe. But Professor Zhang corrected our misunderstanding. He said if U.S. continue to contain China, then China cannot just sit idle. So China just wants to signal that they may respond. But the intention of China is to move the direction into the collaborative direction. So that photo is just showing. I know that is well-shared opinion among the Chinese scholars. Yes, a lot of talk had been discussed.
지금 두 분
We have to wrap up because of the limited time. We learned a lot from our two speakers.
전문 분야이기 때문에
This is the area that requires expertise. And while listening to the opinions of these two experts, if you have not been following the thoughts of these two leaders, it will be difficult for us to understand everything fully. But let me summarize what our speakers presented today for you. The first one is to preserve the thinking and thoughts of our President Kim Dae-jung, and rule of law, peace, and liberty, and democratic values have to be preserved, as emphasized by our Professor Eikenberry. This is going back to the basics, and basics is always important because sometimes we tend to forget the basics and the starting point. I want to remind you once again, liberty, peace, rule of law, democracy are the virtues that made Korea to become what it is now. And based on the sacrifices and thoughts of our President Kim Dae-jung and others, we were able to enjoy the life that we have at the moment. And the second thing that I want to tell you is that in the morning session, Professor Eikenberry also said that the defense line, he said the building blocks of a building are being shaken up. Not just the cracks on the building, but the building blocks are being shaken up. And the alternative route that we can think of is to diversify our relations with neighboring countries. And one speaker mentioned that we need to solidify our existing cooperation with countries like Japan, reducing the dependence only on the United States. Depending on national interest, we can cooperate with different countries, with China and with Japan. So I think, including China and neighboring countries, it is important for us to solidify and strengthen mutual cooperation and bilateral and multilateral cooperation. And third, the competition with China is getting fiercer. The best way is for two countries to go back to 20 years ago. Even though we are competing against one another in the global economy, we need to realize that there are values and benefits that we can enjoy through stronger bilateral cooperation. And also not only in the economic aspect, but also in the security aspect, there are mutual benefits that we can enjoy through stronger bilateral cooperation. And lastly, not only limited to China, but Koreans, they are known to have mixed feelings towards China. Students, businessmen, they still think highly, very highly of China. And there are bystanders in Korea who do not have any neither positive nor negative perception towards China. And there is, on the other hand, at the end of the spectrum, there are some media outlets that cover negative stories of China. But on one side, China is saying that they will become a responsible great power. So they are showing their commitment. So we should show our support. We don't know whether they can actually become a responsible great power. It is dependent on their commitment and effort. But if they need our support, we can show our support. That should be the mindset when we approach China for stronger relations. Since we are in the honorable presence of Director Zhang, who often has chance to talk to high-ranking officials in China, he is also part of the political discourse and discussions. He has extensive network with high-ranking officials, so I'm sure Director Chung can share the stories and our thoughts in Korea back to Chinese officials so that we can talk about constructive roadmap for stronger bilateral relations in the coming years. We ask for your expert advice and opinions in the future as well. There will be the end. With those closing remarks, I'd like to wrap up today's session 2. Thank you so much for your participation in session 2. Thank you once again to our moderator, and the former ambassador of Chung, and also our director Chung and Professor Lee. Let's remember the philosophy and spirit left behind by our president, and it is now being attested once again by the thoughts and opinions that are shared here with us. So from 3:30, we will have a peace round table. I ask for your continued interests, and I will see you back here again at 3:30.